Hi everybody, I thought it would be fun to take you on a little tour of my craft room. Right before you enter my door to the room, I've got some stained glass that my mom did for me that are on the front of our house. And this is where the magic happens. No, I didn't clean it up for you. I thought maybe you'd appreciate seeing a craft room looking like a craft room looks. I even left the closet doors open. Okay, so over here in front of the window I have my ironing board and my iron all set to go. I worked on some Boy Scout patches last night, so that's why that's out here. And there is a square from the Elber's cowl that I started and never finished. Over here, I keep a little bulletin board of notes I get from people like you. Appreciate all your notes. And this spot right here I hung up to put kind of my favorite skeins that they'd kind of keep out in the open and I'd see them and be inspired by them. Up here is some bigger skeins of sock yarn and bigger skeins of yarn that still could be projects. They're not really scraps that would go in any blanket. This cool knitted piece right here, a friend of mine across the street when I lived in Washington State in Tacoma, my friend, as a going away gift, knit me my house. So that is my knit version of my house. And she lived across the street from me, so she saw my house every day out her front window. Isn't that cute? One funny thing about my wall here of yarn, my husband walked in and saw my yarn. He said, "Oh my gosh, you have so much yarn." Little does he know. He probably does know, but in those bins are really my yarn stash. But we'll just kind of let him think that's all the yarn I have. My Andre Sue Knits cool sock blank that I just don't want to knit from. It's just a work of art. Oh, and then my husband and I got these cute little hanging sheep when we were in Austria and Salzburg together. That's a Betsy Beads knitted beaded necklace I made, and my old-timey sock blockers. This is the workstation, the desk, where it all happens. I'm kind of set up for my next podcast actually, so that might be coming up next. I might just tag this onto the front of it, but yeah, works in progress. Oh, all my little tools for knitting. Just, you know, you probably have the same setup. This case I got actually from Home Goods. I love it. It's clear. I can see everything that's in it. I can pull the drawers completely out and set them down, work, you know, with whatever's in them. Love that. And this is just a little picture area. These copper birds, that's a tin, you know, copper, I can't think of the name, where they use the nail and the hammer. My grandfather made those, and the story goes he actually made them when he spent a year in a sanitarium because of tuberculosis. So they're really special to me. They're still framed the way my grandmother had framed them, and just works of art done while he was recuperating from tuberculosis in maybe the 1940s or 50s. My original drawing of Treehouse Knits logo that my husband made for me, a little bit different than the current one. My son George had the idea of putting the skein of yarn on a flag off the treehouse. And just some notes. One of my favorite sayings. Love what she's wearing. And then I just got this cute little knit with a heart on some barnwood. And of course, so much yarn, so little time. We all know the feeling. I've got some of my favorite books out here, another bulletin board, and when we walk over here, I've got my mannequin that I like to use during the podcast and just like to have stuff on her. Mannequin's name is Elsie, and again, the head mannequin is Emma, all ready for my podcast. You know, something I just got at Costco that I absolutely love is this 4-tiered rolling cart. Before I had a big basket, actually I had that big light bluish green basket, and I just throw all my works in progress in there, all my project bags. I could never find anything, so now I kind of have them on different levels, and it's so much easier to find things. Highly recommend that. And then you have my closet that my dad helped me install. I put my yarn in here by weight. That's how it's sorted. You can see the tops are busting off because I have so much yarn that I need to use. This shelf, I keep some just paper scrapbooking kind of supplies, and then you'll see a lot more of my extra books and magazines that I'm keeping, my beloved label maker, just some gifts ready to go. And up here is just a schmick-schmack of other crafty things that I pull out occasionally and use. Like last night, I actually used the die cutter machine to die cut the stickies that put my kids' Boy Scout badges on. So that made it a lot easier than cutting circles on the sticky stuff, if that makes any sense. Anyway, so that's my wonderful, wonderful storage area, closet. And I keep down here my serger. My mother-in-law gave me an embroidery machine of hers that she wasn't using, and just some random stuff. Again, more random stuff. You'll see down there it says lace. That's a box of lace doilies, and above it is a box of other items that I've inherited from my family. Mostly hope chest items that were made a long, long time ago. Definitely will be doing a podcast on that sometime soon. And then I've got my Swift, my ball winder. Have a TV up here that I love to use. My scale for weighing yarn. And that, my friends, is a skein of Hedgehog fibers in their sock yarn typewriter that it was definitely a when knitting attacks moment if you watch the Knit More Girls. I do not know what I'm going to do with that, but I will win. And then over here is where I like to sew my project bags and other types of sewing. I got this really cool tourney thing from Home Goods as well, too. I think it's supposed to be used in the bathroom, maybe to hold cosmetics or something, but I love it. I love Lazy Susan type things. And then my father-in-law actually built me this sewing table many years ago. It's gone through many moves, but it makes it so my Baby Lock Creative Pro fits right in there, and it's pretty smooth and flat and makes for easy sewing. So, my friends, that is the room. And I hope you enjoyed my tour. Hi everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed that very candid tour of my craft room. Again, I thought I would give you the real craft room experience. I thought about cleaning up, but you know what? This is who I am, and this is how I create, and I thought you all would enjoy that. So I hope you did, and if you have any questions about anything I showed you, feel free to just ask them down below. Welcome to episode 10 of Treehouse Knits podcast. My name is Rachel. I'm your host. I'm coming to you from Grand Rapids, Michigan, where it is currently snowing outside of my window, and I'm so glad that you're here. It's a special episode today because I am celebrating my 500 subscribers on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. I think I'm nearing 600 now. So I'm excited to share with you the items that are part of this subscriber giveaway. The first piece that's part of the giveaway came to me to give to you from Emanisha at Hopkins Sewing Studio. She is a talented, talented fiber person and sewer, and this is her sock size bag. She used an awesome tulip pink fabric with a fox centered on the back. And what I also love about this bag is that it's got a great box bottom. The length of it is long enough that you can put a hanger or two of yarn in it and your project. Awesome zipper pull. And the piece de la resistance, if I said that right, is this awesome pocket in the front. I never thought that I would care about having a pocket in the front, but it is so great to hold just your little scissors, or if you're doing some cabling, the cable needle so you can find it easily, a row counter. I had a project where I used my bag from her, and I was able to find the row counter instead of rummaging through the bag itself. The inside is that cute polka dot fabric that is on the pocket. So check her out. Thank you so much, Emanisha, for sending this bag along for me to give to our viewers. And you can find her on Etsy under Hopkins Sewing Studio. The next item that goes with this subscriber giveaway is a skein of Brew City yarn. These two lovely ladies are from the Milwaukee area, and this is their premium draft sock yarn in merino and nylon, 400 yards, so it's a plump 100 grammer. And this is their colorway called Conversation Hearts. I just thought that was such a beautiful, beautiful mix of colors that would make super, super fun socks or a shawl or part of a shawl. I actually picked it up this weekend. They were doing a trunk show at my local yarn store in Grand Rapids, and it was great to meet them. And if either of you watched the show, super excited to give this to one of our viewers. The next prize, yes, there's 3. There's actually 4 prizes. I have 2 more things as part of this subscriber giveaway. This awesome set of stitch markers. It's actually a progress keeper in the front, and then 3 stitch markers. They're elephants, and they are from The Yarn and I. You can find Cappy's shop, The Yarn and I, on Etsy. And these were actually, I mentioned them in a podcast before. I have a set just like them. They were made by her mother, who I believe lives in Texas, but she's clearly someone who knows how to do jewelry and beading, because they're French wire wrapped and they're jewelry grade beads. They're just gorgeous, and you feel very fancy when you use them on your knitting. I really love them, and I look forward to having one of you have those as well. And the final thing that I'm throwing in as part of the giveaway is this Gleaner travel size. I'm sure you've all heard of the Gleaner. This travel size Gleaner is so great to keep in your glove box of your car when you're driving to work and you realize you got fuzzies on your sweater. Everything, this pulls off everything and makes things look new, and I'm throwing one of those in as well. So the Gleaner, the awesome yarn from Brew City, the Yarn and I stitch markers, and the beautiful bag from Emanisha Hopkins Sewing Studio. So how do I win, you ask? Just go to my Ravelry podcast page. That's Treehouse Knits on Ravelry. If you go to the groups section, just search under Treehouse Knits. I will make a section on there with the giveaway, and I will have some sort of prompt. It won't be hard. So just go there, sign up, and I will draw on my next podcast the winner. So let's talk about what's on my mannequins and on me. First of all, on me, this is my Hitchhiker. I made this many years ago during swim lessons for my sons. Actually, I started it on a trip to Puerto Rico with my husband, and then I finished it during like a year of swim lessons with the boys. There's some, you know, they're supposed to have these teeth that come out. Some of the teeth are longer than others because it was just a mindless knit. But I love how the Collinette Jitterbug in Frangipanani, I don't know how to say that, turned out. I just love the colors and the way that the variegated worked in the Hitchhiker. Great pattern. I think we tend to forget about it because it's been a while since it was really, really popular. But great mindless knitting and wonderful end result. I just have it wrapped around once, and then I just kind of tied it to keep it in place. I just wear it different ways all the time. But so that's my Hitchhiker. The hat that I have here, I made this hat quite a while ago. This, boy, what is this hat called? It's been so long. You'll see the cables, and then I even got to pick some really cool buttons. I'm looking up the hat right now. It is called Woven, and it is by Thea Coleman. I think Baby Cocktails is her her company's name. I made it out of Knit Pick City Tweed. If you saw several episodes ago, I made the reader's wrap out of this, so it was just some extra yarn that I had, but I just thought it was a really unique pattern. I get compliments when I wear it, and it's a good practice in a little bit of cabling, but a lot of stockinette, and again, you get to pick some fun buttons for it. So that is called Woven, Thea Coleman. And then I will talk about what's on Elsie a little bit later when we talk about works in progress, which we can probably just jump in right now. Works in progress. This is my Heidi Kirrmaier sweater that I've been making out of Woolfolk Far. I have one of the sleeves done, almost done in it, and I tried it on and I really like how it's fitting. This yarn is incredible. I've spoken about it before in other podcasts of mine. I'm really hoping when I block it out that this curling that's happening here kind of opens up, because it is kind of a pretty edging that I'd like to show off, and it's also curling a little on the bottom, but just hoping that some blocking does help for that. A little tip, as I was knitting up the sleeve, I like doing sleeves with magic loop with a long cord. I find I've tried everything. I've used DPNs in the round, and what I find is you're constantly moving. If you're knitting from the sweater, you're constantly moving the bulk of the sweater in a circle. It's almost like you want to have a lazy Susan sitting in front of you with the sweater on it so you can twist it while you're knitting. If you've experienced it, you know what I mean. And I've also tried the little circulars, and like the 9-inch circulars, and I have the same problem. I find when I use the magic loop with a long needle, I can just go knit one side, knit, 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 flip it, knit the other side, flip, you know, and then flip it, and just kind of go back and forth like that instead of having to go in a circle. Hope that makes sense. The other benefit of having it on a long cord is that you can slide your work onto the cord and you can try on your sweater, and I'm glad I was able to do that because I determined that I didn't want to do the decreases right away in this, and I kept the full number of arm stitches, so I'll probably start decreasing at this point because this is about the elbow area. So just a little sweater tip from me to you. The other tip I wanted to share, with this sweater, I had stitches on waist yarn, and then I had to pick up stitches underneath the armhole. And when you're picking up stitches that are on waist yarn, I find it's a lot easier to pick them up if you use a smaller size needle than the needle that you're using for your project. And better yet, use an interchangeable set with an extra cord, and use that cord to hold on those stitches, and then all you have to do is add your tips on when you're ready to knit in the round, if that makes sense. So I've done that to me is the ultimate best way of knitting, like you know, when you're picking up stitches and holding stitches, just use a cord from your interchangeables if you have a set. But if you don't and you have it just on yarn, use a much smaller needle to pick it up, and then change, you know, then use your regular size needle to knit off that smaller needle. The loop size that you're creating is dependent on the size of your working needle, not the needle that your work is on, if that makes sense. So that's just a couple of tips there for you. So again, that's Quicksand by Heidi Kirrmaier. Hopefully by the time I podcast again, that one will be finished, and maybe I'll even be wearing it. The next work in progress I wanted to show you is a Tin Can Knits mitten, pair of mittens called Antler Mittens. It's a paid for pattern. This is normally when I'm doing cables, I would use more of a tonal, but I really like how this variegated yarn is working up with the cable section. I never thought I would, but I think it's because it's a quick change variegate, and yarn that I'm using is Mountain Colors in their Clover colorway, and I love seeing it in a cabled pattern, but then on this side of the work you can see how it works up in stockinette. I really haven't modified this at all. I'm doing the pattern as written. Now many mitten patterns have you putting yarn again on the waste yarn, and then when you come back to do the thumb, they have you pick up these stitches and then you have to pick up and knit stitches up here. And I found that I kind of use the same technique I use when I'm doing my cut in afterthought heel. So I will pick up these stitches, I will put these stitches, I should say, on a needle, but then I'll go ahead and just pick up 1 or 2 more stitches on that same row, and then I'll go ahead and pick up the number of stitches that the pattern says. I do the same on the other side where I pick up a couple extra stitches in the live stitch row, and then I just decrease those out when I'm making the thumb, and that makes for absolutely no holes on the sides here. It's just a similar situation that you have with an afterthought cut-in heel. So that's just another trick, and I'll show you, maybe I'll show you next time exactly how it works up. And if you have any questions, feel free to just ask them down below. But this antler mittens pattern, wonderfully written, highly recommend it, super fun pattern to knit. Okay, so another project that I will be starting this week. You've probably heard online or seen on Ravelry that Curious Handmade has another mystery knit along happening. It just started today. I got my first clue. Haven't started it yet, but I have wound up the skeins. If you watched my tour of my craft room a little bit ago, you'll have seen on my desk the pile of Hedgehog. That is the second time that I have tried to wind Hedgehog sock, and it's ended in a mess. I don't know what I'm doing wrong with that, but it happened with my skein of Film Noir, and now it happened with my skein of Typewriter. So what I ended up doing, and I will insert some pictures. This morning I ended up winding all of my yarn. I'll show you the yarn that I'm using for this project. So here is my Hedgehog Typewriter. I'm using Sue Said So colorway from Legacy Knits. And then this is the skein, that blue-green skein is the Maui Yarns skein that I got when I went to Hawaii. So these are the 3 colors that I'm using for the Mystery Make-Along with Helen Stewart. It's called the Snow Melt Shawl Mystery Knit-Along. And I'm going to insert some pictures here. I wound up my skeins this morning, starting with this one, and spent a good probably hour trying to untangle. This is about 50 grams. I've got 50 grams more that I need to untangle, but I just had to set it down. I'll put in some pictures here of my debacle. And I will show you progress as I go on this project. Snow Melt Shawl Make-Along. The other thing that I'm working on, around Christmas time, I left my sock drawer open in the bedroom, and my husband was pulling out socks from his drawer, and he looks over and he says, "I want socks like you have." He's got 3 pairs of hand knit socks. 2 of them, I think 2 or 3 his mom made. Maybe he's got 4 pair. I don't know, but he doesn't have as many as I have, and I do have quite a bit of handmade socks. And I do have a lot of yarn, a lot of skeins that he would really like the coloring. So I declared this year, #SocksForHubby 2017. And if you're following me on Instagram, I'm Treehouse Knits on Instagram, you'll see some of the progress I'm making. He's got size 14 feet, so I find that I have to knit a whole 100 grams. I knit 50-gram tubes. Here we go. Here's one that's done. Usually do them toe up 2 at a time. This is a Lang Javol skein that I just love the color of that. Browns and grays and taupes and whites. And then this is the Patton's Croy colorway that a lot of people I've seen knit up, and I do love, but I end up knitting all 100 grams into the tubes, and then I use a different color for the heel at this point. And I picked up a skein of this gray. I've never used brown sheep's sock yarn. It's brown sheep Wildfoot. Picked it up at Michigan Fiber Studio when I was there for the Brew City trunk show, and this is in the color Gunsmoke. I think it'll be kind of cool heel for these, and it definitely matches these. So that's where we are with those socks, and I'm just going to keep knitting socks for hubby, and I'm going to use the hashtag on Instagram, so if you're interested in joining me, it's not a true knit along, but feel free to use the hashtag, because I would love to see socks that you're knitting for your hubby or for your significant other, for any man who is knit worthy. Maybe I should change the hashtag to that. But anyway, so that is another project that I'm working on throughout the year. So in terms of acquisitions, I don't really have any. Vogue Knitting Live was one big acquisition. So one thing I wanted to, though, tell you about are, first of all, I'm joining in Hey Brownberry, her Mars, if you know her. I'm joining in on her Make Whips Not Waste and her Love the Whip You're With hashtags and knit-alongs. The Make Whips Not Waste, I made some project bags out of some blue jeans, old curtains that I had in my boys' room several years ago, and just some hand-me-down quilting cotton that I got from some family members. I'll put pictures of the project bags here. So it's a make-along not only for knitting, but really any kind of way to use what you have and make something beautiful out of it. So I love that idea of making works in progress and not more waste. And I love the idea of Love the Whip You're With, which I think Shelley, Mars and my friend Shelley came up with that very cute hashtag. But anyway, love the one year whip. Again, it's just a whip. Work on those whips. Get those whips done. Works in progress. So I'm joining in on that. You might want to check that out if you're interested. A audio podcast that I've been listening to. I heard about this podcast from Sarah from Fiber Trek. And the podcast is called The Woven Road, and it's hosted by Meadow. And then she has special guests that come on the podcast. The podcast started out with her and another friend of hers that did the podcast, and it did have an explicit tag on it, but since it's just become Meadow and her guests, that explicit tag has gone away. So if that kind of thing bothers you, just know that. I find her podcast fascinating. It's really unique. I believe she's an archaeologist, historian type individual. She lives in Reykjavik, Iceland with her husband, and definite fiberista, loves all things fiber, but especially loves the history. She talks a lot about archaeology and different types of fiber materials that have been found in digs, and how they how you can tell from a piece of cloth in an archaeology dig where the people were from. It's just that piece of cloth tells a story. And of course, I love learning about the history of different crafts, and when I'm knitting, I feel like it kind of connects me to my ancestors who did a lot of crafting, and I'm fascinated by the whole idea of how many years ago what I'm doing was actually a necessity for them. For me, it just is fun and a joy and a hobby and a creative outlet. It was a very long, time-consuming process, and it was considered, a lot of it was considered women's work. So anyways, in the last episode of The Woven Road, Meadow talked about an archaeologist who she's read through her studies and has textbooks out on fiber and the history, archaeology, that kind of thing. But this particular archaeologist also has written a book called Women's Work, The First 20,000 Years. And this is not a new book. It's actually from the mid-90s. But I right away ordered it when Willow talked about it because it's about women, cloth, and society in early times. So in the preface, I just thought I'd read to you just briefly the preface to give you an idea of what the book is. She says, "My mother liked to weave and sew, so I grew up with interesting textiles all around, learning to sew and weave for myself at an early age. I was constantly being made aware of the form, color, and texture of cloth. Textiles have a particular crossing structure that dictates what sort of patterns will be easy and obvious to weave, or conversely hard to weave. Thus later, when I began to study classical and Bronze Age Mediterranean archaeology at college, I soon noticed decorations on durable things like pottery and walls that looked as if they had been copied from typical weaving patterns. But when I suggested this idea to archaeologists, they responded that nobody could have known how to weave such complicated textiles so early. The answer was hard to refute, on the face of it, because very few textiles have come down to us from before medieval times outside of Egypt, where people generally wore plain white linen. Unconvinced, I decided to spend 2 weeks hunting for data on the degree of sophistication of the weaving technology to see at least whether people could have made ornate textiles back then. I expected to write my findings into a small article, maybe 10 pages, suggesting that scholars ought to consider at least the possibility of early textile industries. But when I began to look, data for ancient textiles lay everywhere, waiting to be picked up. By the end of the 2 weeks, I realized that it would take me at least a summer or two to chase down and organize the leads I had turned up, and that I could be writing a 60-page monograph. By the end of 2 more summers, I knew I was headed for a 200-page book. That little book turned into a research project that consumed 17 years and yielded a 450-page tome covering many times the planned geographical area and time span. It finally appeared in 1991 as Prehistoric Textiles, and that's from Princeton University Press, and that's one of the textbooks that this archaeologist wrote. But for that book, I had restricted myself to the history and development of the craft, a big enough topic as it turned out. Along the way, I kept running across wonderful tidbits of information about the women, virtually always women, who produced these textiles, and about the values that different societies put on the products and their makers. When I talked about my work, people seemed especially eager for these vignettes, stories that told of women's lives thousands of years ago. They urged me to write a second book on the economic and social history of ancient textiles, in effect on the women who made the cloth and clothing. So that's what this book is about. I know. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I'm fascinated by this kind of thing. So I am wondering if any of you might be interested in picking up the book, and then we could do maybe a virtual book club and discuss the book. I would be happy to put together some questions and lead that up and see if we could maybe have some sort of virtual book club discussion on this. So if you are interested, I will make on the Treehouse Knits podcast page a, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, go to Treehouse Knits podcast Ravelry page, and you'll see on there a section where if you're interested, you can sign up. I got this book on Amazon, I think for under $15. I looked to see at my library if they had it, and they did not. So that's roughly what you'd have to pay. But again, go to Ravelry and let me know if anybody would be interested. I think it would be a lot of fun to talk about this book. So I think that's it. You know what? I think I have a couple of finished objects that I didn't show you completely. Hang on. So I know I posted on Instagram, but I just wanted to show you the finished objects here. Hopefully this doesn't get blown out. This is my foison hat that I finished with the beautiful CVM Merino cross from Never Say Never Farm in Alto. I think the beauty of this pattern, if you can see it, is the top. I've tried to design some patterns or modify some hat patterns in the past and make the top look good, and that's a hard thing to do. So kudos to Evie Scott for figuring that one out. It blocked out beautifully and I love it. And then the other project that I finished was the sockhead hat, and I stuck the pom-pom on. The pom-pom's really heavy. And while maybe if I were 15 years old, I would have fun wearing it really slouchy, but I think at 45, I look silly. I will show you. So, I don't know. It's just clear. It's just not my thing. It just feels kind of funny, but I think it'd be cute on somebody else. However, I really like this hat. So one thing that I do when I put anything on the top of my hat, any kind of pom-pom, and some pom-poms I do like, but this one not so much. I just tie it on. I don't weave in the ends. I just tie it on, bow tie, like I'm tying my shoe, I guess. And then that way you can untie it and you can take it off. And this goes for if you're knitting, you know, gift knitting as well. And then I can do whatever I want with this hat. And I can wear it slouchy. I can wear it rolled up. And then I kind of feel like myself again. Anyway, so that's the last tip and the last finished objects I want to show you. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Again, join that 500 subscriber giveaway on the Ravelry, my podcast page, Treehouse Knits. I just thank you for joining me and for subscribing to my channel. If you're not yet a subscriber, please feel free to hit subscribe and then join in on that giveaway. I hope to see you on the next episode of Treehouse Knits. Bye.